Hi, good afternoon and happy Earth Day, everyone. So we have a wonderful discussion happening today on impact investing. We decided actually to put this panel together after an article was written by Ken Pucker on Harvard Business Review. His article was titled Overselling Sustainability Reporting. And it created a lot of back and forth on the post I put on LinkedIn. And Luc, David, and Hasani were the most active. So I say, well, guys, I took you up on that. Let's do a panel and you're going to give your perspective to everyone. So my name is Peggy van der Plage. I'm the managing partner of Raw Growth. And these are my three formidable conspirators. So the first one, Hasani Brissett. Hasani is the CFO at Ideal Ventures and is based in Toronto, Canada. Then we have Luc Lapointe. Luc is the founder of the BC Lab and is based in Cali, Colombia. So definitely no snow for you today, and contrary to us. And then we have David O'Leary. David is the founder of Kind Wealth and is also based in Toronto, Canada. So before jumping in the topic, would you mind giving us a short intro of who you are and what's your connection to impact investing? And maybe Hasani, if you're comfortable starting, that would be great.
Okay. Thank you so much, Peggy. And thank you to my fellow panelists, and happy Earth Day to everyone out there. Again, Hasani Brissett. I'm the Chief Financial Architect here at Ideal Ventures, Inc. And Ideal Ventures, Inc. is a venture capital and private equity platform that's focused on impact investing and ESG, where we primarily back technology companies that their founders are systemically excluded, where they are women-led, and where they are people of color. And it's very centric to what we do. Again, impact investing, ESG, and what we obviously are discussing in more detail today is socially responsible investing.
Thank you so much, Hasani. Luc, do you want to jump in next?
Absolutely. I'm Luc Lapointe. I'm the founder of the BC Lab, Blending Capital. And Blending Capital came with the idea that Canada was focused around blended finance in 2015 or 2013. And we thought that finance alone was not going to solve the problem, so focused on capital, which means non-financial capitals. So I'm based in Cali, Colombia, but work globally with Concordia, based in New York. And we always have these discussions around investment and not the lack of liquidity, but how do we make it impactful? How do we create these pipelines between money and projects? And this is where we spend most of our time focusing right now on this energy, or the pipeline builders, as we call it.
Thank you so much, Luc. And David, last but not least, do you want to give us a bit a background on yourself?
Sure. So I probably have a foot in both of the Hasani and Luc's camps. I spent most of my first part of my career at Morningstar in investment research, so evaluating professional money managers, for instance, pension or mutual fund managers. But I took kind of I also spent some time in financial advisory work, working with individuals, doing traditional portfolio management and financial planning. And then I took a kind of pretty big pivot in my career and spent some time running impact investing for a World Vision, which is one of the larger humanitarian INGOs around how do we unlock investment capital as a means of funding solutions to the challenges that vulnerable children face in developing countries. And so we're doing a lot of work around social innovation, like innovative social enterprises, solving problems, funding them, and providing financing to entrepreneurs in these countries that can't otherwise access loans and the financial capital they need to grow and expand their businesses.
Okay, thank you very much. So one thing I want to start with is the definition of impact investing, because just the definition was creating already some conversation between us. So if I look at the dictionary definition of impact investing, it's investments that are made into organizations with the intention to generate a measurable, beneficial social or environmental impact alongside financial return. So, Luc, do you want to start a bit on the definition? I know that it's a button for you.
Yeah, no, it sure is, and it reminds me of the year when we worked on tobacco, and then trying to ask for the government to come up with new policies, and always said you have to be careful what you wish for because you get stuck with it at the end, right? When it comes to policy, it's a little bit what's happening with impact investment. And I think about 2 months ago, Amit Budi, the president of the Global Impact Investment Network, was in the Zoom call, and I think IFC was there as well. And at the end of the call, they're talking about impact investment. Both of them were microphone open. Says, "My God, we should have called it positive impact investment, right? I mean, from the onset, because." And they said, "No, it would have been too complicated for the word to understand this." But I think this is where impact investment right now. It's probably the right word, but maybe you have to quantify it, right? And I saw a recent newsletter from Rockefeller a couple of days ago talking about positive impact, so not just impact investment, because any investment generates an impact. There are positive and negative, and not positive for everybody. So it could be positive for you. Just thinking about some of the communities here, mining is very important to them, so they would maybe let a little bit of natural capital out for creating jobs, right? So impact is an interesting word, but I find it still confusing where you have to really quantify what is an impact, basically.
And before we jump to the notions of return on impact investing, Hasani, David, anything you want to jump in on that definition, or do you want to jump to the return on impact?
Certainly, I'll jump in. It's very, very important, and again, it's where we all want to have a positive impact, and I believe, especially now that we're very much in a digital revolution, it's it's that social dilemma. I'm not certain if you guys saw that Netflix documentary, but it's helping entrepreneurs to make sure from the outset that they have a framework in which there will be a positive impact in their businesses and how their businesses affect the local community and obviously the global community at large, because technology companies are built with a global scale in mind.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Exactly. David?
Yeah, I just want to underscore the nomenclature is important, and impact investing, while Luc really pointed out well, and Hasani was kind of referencing, businesses that are for-profit businesses can have a positive impact. They can certainly have a negative impact. We can reduce the negative impacts. We can try to accentuate the positives. And so we can talk about investing with impact, or thinking about the impacts of your investments. But when we want to use the term impact investing, it does have a very well-defined and well-accepted definition, and there are a lot of terms in this space that don't have very strict definitions, and terms blend, and so that's a problem. It creates confusion for people. So where we do have really well-defined definitions, I think we should try to stick to them. Impact investing does have so the impact that you have needs to be both intentional and measurable, and then not only measure that, but manage the impact so that you're getting better and better at it. And so one helpful way to think about that distinction from a layperson perspective is, you can invest in for-profit businesses that are, the heart of their business is around generating a profit from selling shoes, making clothes, whatever they're, it's the business in and of itself isn't necessarily about solving some sort of social or environmental problem. They're meeting a need that consumers have. And in the process of that, they can do that very responsibly, and they can try to have a positive impact on people in the communities through the process of making clothes and selling those clothes to consumers. On the other hand, a true impact business would be one where the whole business was set up for the purpose of solving some significant social or environmental problem, and they did it in a way where they could profit from the solution to that problem. And so, like, technologies that extract carbon from the atmosphere to try to battle climate change are a pretty good example of that, where we can sell this technology, We can put a price on it and we can make money off of it. And that's a more sustainable way. So I like to think about it. And I think it's helpful to think about it in the context of, a socially responsible for-profit business or a dedicated impact business that's all about solving a problem.
Exactly, and that's where this concept of responsible transformations, but also all the requirement for reporting gets even more important when the businesses are not just per definition impact business. My question for you, and I will stick with you, David, to start, is the notions of return on impact investing. The four of us had a different approach actually on that, which I think is interesting. So do you want to start, David, with your own perspective on the return on impact investing?
Oh boy, I'll try to keep this real short because I could talk a long time on this. So the notion, so we went from a place where we had Milton Friedman economics, which was this idea that businesses should only concern themselves with profiting and ignore the social and environmental impact. And I think we've collectively realized that that's silly, to put it mildly. That there's no reason why it presumed that you'd have to sacrifice some sort of return to do something positive, or to at least reduce your negative impact on the world. And I think we've got plenty of examples of how and why doing the right thing can also be long-term profitable for a company, like treating employees well and cleaning up your environmental messes and things like that. So we've kind of come to this place of like, oh, right, we don't have to sacrifice returns to do the right thing. But I think sometimes we go the other extreme and everyone says you never have to, you can do better and you never have to sacrifice any returns to do the right thing. And I think the answer lies somewhere in the middle, which is you don't always have to sacrifice. Sometimes there are these win-wins out there and let's take advantage of those. But sometimes some problems, some challenges in this world, there isn't a way to profit from the solution. And the solution is going to just take us to, it's going to require us to give something up, to pay some money to. And so I'll give a good example. When a disaster hits a developing country or any country, and you've got people whose homes have been destroyed and the infrastructure is, the roads and the infrastructure is down and businesses are shut down, there's no power. We need to get supplies and emergency goods in to solve that problem. And there's no setting up an investment opportunity where we're going to profit from the solution. It's too urgent and we just need basic goods and services being provided. So that's an extreme example, but I think it highlights the point that some problems can't be solved through investment. We're not going to profit from those solutions. So I would just say, there's a middle ground. Sometimes we don't have to give up returns, but sometimes we do. It depends on what problem you're trying to solve. Thank
you, David. And I think also educating investors on that is an important point. Luc, I'll go to you. You have a perspective that is definitely, whether on the left side or on the right side, depending on how we look at that, but that is an interesting perspective. So I leave it to you to develop it.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting what David mentioned, and where we are in the space. It reminds me of back to the banking reform in 1997. When we're looking at what they have in the US, which is called the Community Reinvestment Act, something that you would never think would exist even in the US as a capitalist country. But again, it's a transparency mechanism that the state uses by having the banks report on how they behave in the community. So are they taking more money out than reinvesting in the communities where they're taking the deposit? And eventually, at the end of the day, the legislator will give a ranking to each of the bank, right? A, B, C, and D. And it's not about saying that D is better or worse than A or anything, but it lets the consumer make a decision, right? Do I want a bank here, in a bank where I know this bank actually invests in the communities and lends in these communities and works with these communities, or a bank that just doesn't give a heck about what they do in the communities? I mean, just take the money and send the money somewhere where they'll make more money out of it. And it's a personal decision at the end, but at least it's an informed decision, or a more informed decision, right? And I think it's not happening. And then looking back a little bit, what David talked about some of the business as well. And I remember 7 years ago lending in Colombia. And you look at so much inequality. It's not even funny to see so much inequality in one place in a country that's so beautiful. And in discussion with the heads of Chamber of Commerce and heads of industries and saying, so what are you doing to close that gap, right? I mean, there's got to be a way for you to work with the government or somehow. And he said, well, no, I mean, we do what we do as a business, and we pay taxes, and the rest is for the government to pick it up. And then you try to explain, I mean, there's no, I mean, you can close your eyes and think it doesn't exist, right? But if there's no investment in infrastructures, I mean, there's no sidewalks, so much poverty, it's affecting the price of your currencies, right? It's affecting your ability as a country to negotiate globally because people don't take you seriously. When it comes to all of these issues that the climate and all of these things that are happening. So again, for companies to think, well, yeah, I'm only going to be focused on profit, and I'm going to make some money, and then I'll pay some taxes at the end, whatever I can hide or not hide, and then hope the government does well with it, right? I mean, I think that's an old model that we need to change. Where we talk about blended finance, I haven't seen $1 of blended finance during this pandemic. I mean, the burden was taken by the government. So again, I think there's a lot of opportunities, and thinking that, because you report your balance sheet, that the problem ends there. I mean, as soon as you close your door, it's happening with your employees, it's happening outside with the consumers or the community in which you're working, right? So I think it's important for companies to think beyond the end of the day or the end of the week or the end of the year. And I think this is a good time to do this right now.
Yeah, and this return first argument, from your perspective, something that you can see outdated and keep leading to more inequalities.
Exactly.
Hasani, your turn. What's your perspective on return on impact investing?
Echoing what Luke just touched on, and when one looks at different models across the world and that have been implemented in different times, we sometimes don't realize that as impact investing when it really has been. So going back to Luke's community banking initiatives, which really helped to build America into the great power that it was, right? Wells Fargo, people don't remember that Wells Fargo as a bank started as a community bank. All these others, when one looks at public-private partnerships, that has helped China to become global powerhouse that it has, right? And through our lens here at Ideal Ventures, these are the things we try to look at. For example, solar energy has been around with us going on 70, 80 years, but China made so much solar panels that they have reduced the cost of renewable energy. To some extent, they overproduced where it was like dumping, but they really did bring the price of solar power down. And that has impacted in a positive effect us as a global village. And we're now here in Canada and North America and globally, solar power is becoming a much more bigger part of the energy mix. Mm-hmm. We look at investments into women-led organizations where they have more board seats. For example, it's it could be, this is one that we could talk about. Is it a positive impact or not? But the CEO of Bumble, right? She's the youngest female billionaire in the world. How do we look at that? And it is those companies that backed her when she was on her way from being a private company to now being a public company. So that is a win-win, we believe. And what I think is most important is educational technology and the impact investing, because education is that global equalizer for disenfranchised individuals. And that, I think, has a big part and needs to be a bigger part within impact investing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Hasani. So your perspective, it's really like SRI impact investing can provide strong ROI when done properly. And I would say in 2 words, my perspective is that financial returns cannot be overlooked if we want to scale impact investing. Even I absolutely agree with Luc that we should not focus our long-term vision on financial return. I'm also quite conscious, maybe with my background in finance, that investors will have been formatted that way for so long that it's difficult to turn the switch like that.
But it's not left versus right. It is that combination. When I started out in ETFs, selling ETFs, it was active versus passive management. And it is no, how do you use active and passive investment management to get a better risk reward return for your clients? And I believe that is now the evolution where we're in a digital revolution. It's how do we incorporate both together? And that's where the conversation really needs to come to, where you have governments, private sector, and the impacted or the populace working together hand in hand to build economies, to build countries, and to build a better place for the future generations to come.
Yeah. So I realize we're already out of time, so I can keep you a few more minutes to go for the next questions if you're available, or we can finish in another session. What's okay to continue a little bit more? David, yes. Hasani, do you have a bit more time? Luc as well? A few more time. Okay, so let's go to the next one, and maybe we'll try to be a bit more succinct. So the next point that we were mentioning when we were exchanging on that article was the importance of institutions. And maybe I'll stay with you, Hasani, and can you elaborate on your perspective regarding the importance of institutions in the context of impact investing?
Certainly, Peggy. Institutions certainly have the largest war chests, and where, again, in terms of what Luc and even David touched on, blended finance, where their investing premise is such more long-term that they can give up short-term returns in order to now have a greater impact on their pensioners, investors, etc., and really bring that forward. So both institutions and governments and quasi institutions such as the World Bank, IFC, certainly have the levers in which to work hand in hand with business owners, entrepreneurs, to get their investment vehicles and companies to strength that will certainly have a great impact, positive impact.
Thank you so much, Hasani. So that's a pun for Luc to jump in. So what's your perspective, Luc, on this, the importance of institutions?
Yeah, and again, having the ability to be in both worlds, right? And in Canada when I want, and being in Colombia when I want as well, I think it gives you two different perspectives. And for the past 7 years and more, maybe lobbying these governments here in the region to start thinking beyond looking at finance as finance, right? Foreign direct investment that they're receiving in Canada, in Colombia, for example. I mean, the government doesn't make any difference, right? If it's impact investment or a vulture fund that comes in and says, we'll build houses and get the heck out of the country and make a lot of money, and who cares about the impact, right? For sure, there's something, some kind of a positive impact out of it. But the government will penalize them in the same way, right? I mean, the same tax, the same withholding tax on a vulture fund or impact first fund makes a heck of a difference, right? When the government takes 20% of your of the money that you bring into the country as a withholding tax, right? I mean, it's 20% less that you have to work for. So again, you will pass that cost down to the poorest in the value chain, right? In where you lend. So I think thinking beyond, as I said, the way that we looked at finance and creating these incentive or the nudge, right, for government to regulate and not to over-regulate finance. I think finance does well on its own. but I think create incentive, right? Maybe to nudge some of the funds or investment towards this. Same with the Community Reinvestment Act. I mean, I keep on bringing this up because I think it was such a great experience when I brought the VP of Bank of America to Parliament Hill and speak with elected official and explain. I mean, he says, I don't understand anything about community lending. I don't know anything about it, but I know it's important for us as a bank. So we don't do it. We have community development financial institution in which they provide the capital, and says, we don't understand anything about women or people with disability, but we think it's important that we help them find employment or find a way to manage their life. So we invest in these communities financial institution that does the work for us, right, as a bank. So I think if you create these incentives for finance to go where maybe they're not good as they should be to do this work, but they are a community CDFI or this different type of vehicle that exists that can do this type of work. Talk about regulation.
Thank you, Luc. Yeah, that's a very, very important perspective. And David, I think you also have your head in a collaborative kind of way when it comes to institutions.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think SDG 17 is the unsung hero that no one talks about, but is absolutely critical. It was the reason why it was included. Organizations and institutions need to work together. We've got this was a while ago that the estimates were done, but a $2.5 trillion annual funding gap to meet the SDGs by 2030. And if you look at the amount of money that gets donated globally, it's somewhere less than $1 trillion. That there's no official statistics for this, but if you take kind of a back of the envelope calculation, I get a number somewhere in the neighborhood of $800 billion a year in terms of private donations and official government, development assistance and things like that. And so that shortfall is massive. It's trillions of dollars a year per year shortfall. So there's no other place we can go to find that amount of capital. We're not going to convince governments and individuals to give up 3-4 times the amount we're already giving up, right? The amount of donations goes up marginally each year. Some years it drops, right? So we're not going to get that funding gap is not going to come from giving away money. We have to tap into the capital markets. There's roughly 200 some odd trillion dollars in global investment capital that we can tap into. So absolutely impact investing, finding ways to unlock that capital is important. But the problem is, a lot of investors look at addressing, these problems, particularly in developing countries, as highly risky and not worth the risk to generate that type of return. And so governments, interestingly, through, things like USAID and Global Affairs Canada and their counterparts globally, are in a lot of ways being more innovative than the private sector when it comes to impact investing, because they're willing to try things like, first loss capital to entice, private impact investors to the table. And so it's a good example of why we need institutions to work together and be creative about how and why they're using their capital, so that we can, speed this along, because we just don't have the time to wait. The climate, problem in and of itself is an imperative that has an expiry on it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much, David. So we have 2 minutes before my Zoom meeting shuts us down. So Luc, I know you wanted to make a point on the gap, so you have 60 seconds for that.
All right. Quickly, thank you, Peggy. Now, I think for us, what we think, and to speak to what David just brought as well, is quite often, some of these gaps, right? The knowledge gap at the local level to actually create these deals, right? We call the wizard, the mixologists, the people that have the ability to find these deals and put them into a package and start blending the various source of capital, right? So we're missing this at the local level, and you cannot go to Canada and get trained and come back here. It's the same ecosystem, but they think differently, right? Policy gap, as mentioned, I think government have a big role to nudge or help the industry nudge over. If you don't, then that's fine. Continue with the same principle. I think the other one is the pipeline builder. As I said, again, this 2.5 trillion. And I know we like to say a financial gap, but I don't think there's a financial gap. There's a pipeline gap, right? Even if you got $2.5 trillion tomorrow, it'd be hard to get that money somewhere in developing countries. The projects are not that existent, right? So I think for us, this is, I think, an important is to scale up, local knowledge on how do you deal with finance, policies, better policies, and again, pipeline builders. Again, something that I hope I'll get you all interested in, this big municipality funding gap around the world. I think it's phenomenal that you and I can get a mortgage, but a municipality in Colombia or somewhere in Africa or even in the islands cannot take a loan outright to address some of the resilience. So there's trillions of dollars of green and sustainable finance waiting to be invested, but for the lack of regulation cannot be moved.
Thank you so much.
Sorry about that.
No, that's wonderful. We should actually do a full session just dedicated to that. And you know, David, Hasani, Luc, really, I wanted to thank you to share your insights. And really, on Earth Day, I don't think we could have had a better conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy Earth Day again, guys.
Happy Earth Day, everybody.
Happy Earth Day.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye, guys.